So today we're going to talk to you about why your leaders lied to you about how World War III is going to be fought. Now, when we look at World War III and the scenarios, if you look at the two sides, you take Russia, China, North Korea, Cuba, and all the nations in the Middle East that are aligned with those countries such as Iran, parts of Iraq. And then we look at India, which is the wild card, on which side they'll go with, whether they'll fight the Chinese or they'll side with the Chinese and Russians. And you look at the size of that army, it could be anywhere from 100 million men to 300 or 400 million men, because if you take the Chinese and the Indian armies, the Chinese military could put a 200 million man foot mobile army on the march today. Because if you include the people's militia and the people they would draft into service, they could easily reach 200 million men. And then the Indian army could be expanded to well over 100 million people. So then we look at the Western countries such as the United States, Canada, and Europe. Now, if we take NATO, Canada, the United States, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and our other allies, and we add them all together, we could easily field over 100 million men. So a conventional war for World War III would be entailing somewhere between 250 million and 500 million men and women under military service. So I'm going to ask you a question. If you look at these numbers, the world would have to produce 500 to 600 million belt buckles, 500 to 600 million guns, who knows how much ammunition, aircraft, vehicles, socks, boots. And when you look at the fact that all these countries have been destroying and demilling weapons for the last 50 years as they bring new ones online, that tells you they have no intention of fielding a large army. Because if you look at China, for instance, they sold and demilled a lot of their World War II era weapons and Korean War era weapons, small arms, artillery, that kind of stuff. If they'd have kept that stuff in service, they could have easily equipped 200 or 300 million people. So when you look at the United States is really the only country that could put a time-limited 100 million man army in the field, because we have enough small arms in civilian hands that we could equip 100 million soldiers. The problem is the variety of calibers, the types of weapons. The ammunition supply would be an issue. So you could only engage for certain periods of time because of ammunition shortages. Other countries of the world, the civilians don't own enough weapons that the government could draw on to actually field large armies. So for instance, the U.S. stockpile, there's around 4 million M16s, give or take. And in World War II, we needed 10 million rifles, plus the ones we supplied to other countries. So you can see there's no time to produce that much material. And if you look at what's going on in Ukraine now, pretty much the loss of material in the war by the Ukrainians can't be offset by the armies of NATO and the United States. So the United States is producing and providing the bulk of the munitions for the Ukrainian side of the war. Now, if you look at the Russians and the Chinese working together, they can actually replenish what's being expended, because you have the entire industrial capacity of Norinco, which could be fed into the Russian military from China. So what this brings us to the conclusion is the leaders have lied to you the entire time for the last 50 years. There's been no intention to fight a multi-front war with conventional weapons. It's always been nuclear and biological. And the reason for that is chemical weapons, the amount of tonnage you have to deliver for the area coverage is so high that that's really a special purpose weapon. But if you go on the biological front and the nuclear front, that's the only way the Western powers could actually engage a 200 to 400 million man army or prevent that army from forming. So if you think of World War III, the Western countries would lose in a war of attrition because they can't produce the number of soldiers and the munitions to destroy the other side. So that would force a nuclear conflict. So just some thoughts and ramblings that gives you a little bit better perspective on what's happening today around the world and what kind of lies you're being told. World War III will be a nuclear and a biological war. So you can see already in prepping the battlefield, there's a lot of unusual biological events that have been occurring the last 2 years. So that's a prelude. So please comment, rate, subscribe. We see you on the next video.